ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان، والصلاة والسلام على من أنزل عليه القرآن المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. وبعد. To proceed, in recent months, that is to say since about June of 2020, there has been a flurry of activity on the part of a band of zealous Bible thumpers to discredit the noble Quran, Al-Quran Al-Karim. Polemic hostility of this sort against Muslims and the Quran on the part of Christian missionaries and atheist agitators can hardly be regarded to be a new phenomenon. However, this phenomenon has come into somewhat greater and renewed prominence on YouTube, as I said, in the last couple of months. The reason for this can only be attributed to some very strange remarks by the Salafi preacher Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadhi. These remarks were made during a live online interview conducted by the British YouTube personality Muhammad Hijab, who is also a Salafi preacher, controversialist, and well-known feature of the London Speaker's Corner, where he is well known for his rants and harangues. Yasir Qadhi has yet to publicly disclose exactly what his views on the transmission history of the Quran are. I do not view the transmission history of the Quran as being full of holes, as Yasir al-Qadhi characterized it in the aforementioned interview, of which I will now present a clip.
Clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. Okay, this is what I'm going to say. And
but I think here we
wait, let me finish this, Muhammad, because this is a very important point. I'll let you let me finish this. And by the way, if you are following online media and articles and whatnot, this is no longer hidden news. More and more professors and academics are writing stuff, and it's being publicized on Twitter in the last 2-3 years. I have had at least, I'd say, a dozen people tweet at me like specific articles, like how do you answer this, and about ulum al-Quran, about qira'at, about makhtutat, about issues. These are now well known within the Western Academy, that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be 100 years ago.
That is the clip. I leave it to Yasir to put his exact views on record, and I will not refer to them after this. As already noted, these assaults by this band of Christian Bible thumpers are not new. Similar kinds of attacks or assaults first began in earnest, I would say, in January 1999, a very long time ago, with the publication and the publicity afforded to, well, it was with the publication of an article that appeared actually in the American neoconservative mouthpiece, the magazine known as the Atlantic Monthly. It appeared in the January 1999 issue, authored by one Toby Lester, and it was entitled, What is the Quran, with a K. This article tried to give prominence to a discovery of a cache of manuscripts of the Quran written on parchment, which had come to light in Yemen, in the city of Sana'a, during renovations on Al-Jami' al-Kabir, or the Grand Mosque of Sana'a, and that was in 1972. So it was in 1972 that these Sana'a manuscripts, as they came to be known, they are also known as the Sana'a palimpsests. That is when they first came to light, in 1972. The term palimpsest, in case you're wondering, because they're also known as the Sana'a palimpsests, refers to a manuscript that has been overwritten. That is to say, its original writing has been washed or scraped away and been replaced by another writing on the same writing surface. So this article appeared in January 1999 in the Atlantic Monthly by Toby Lester. Now, it was claimed in this article, on the authority of one of the German Orientalists or academics who had access to the original finds, namely one Gerd R. Puin of the University of the Saarland, which at the time would have been in East Germany, because it was in the 70s. And so his authority was invoked to claim that these manuscripts were documentary evidence of some sort of an ur-text, a putative original text of the Quran, or a kind of proto-Quran, if you will, which differs from what the Muslims today recite as the Quran or regard as the Quran. A number of other scholars were cited in this article, and you must keep in mind that this was not an academic piece. It was a journalistic one. So it lacked full documentation and an important nuance. But at any rate, a host of other scholars were cited to back these claims, such as Michael Cook of Princeton University. I actually studied with Michael Cook at Princeton University, among other professors. And in fact, I was there when this article first came out. In turn, the extremely bizarre theories of Michael Cook, which are set out sort of really indirectly in a book he wrote called Ḥāģīrism, which he co-wrote with Patricia Crone, although they're not directly concerned with the Quran. Their ideas were based on their mentor, now the late John Wansbrough, who wrote a work called Quranic Studies. And of course, Patricia Crone, I think I mentioned, was his co-author. She is also now deceased. At any rate, scholars of this kind, and including figures even such as Günter Lühling and so on and so forth, were cited in this article. Now, I'm not going to address what is all stated there in that article or what is claimed in that article. I can provide a link to that if anyone is interested. What I would like to focus on is the resurrection, so to speak, of some of these ideas and some of these theories on the part of these Bible thumpers. And I have in mind specifically J. Smith and Daniel Allen Brubaker. They have, especially the aforementioned, the latter, Mr. Brubaker, or Dr. Brubaker. He does have a Ph.D. from Rice University. He has returned to this approach, and I will explain what I mean by this approach. And in the case of Smith, he too has an interest in line with those of Brubaker, but is more concerned with what are called the qira'at, or the recitations of the Quran being primarily an oral tradition, but he doesn't look at it that way. And Brubaker is very much focused on manuscripts and the ancient manuscripts of the Quran, such as those that we mentioned that came to light in Sana'a. But there are many manuscripts of ancient manuscripts of the Quran, and Brubaker has devoted a great deal of time to studying these. Dr. Brubaker devoted his Ph.D. dissertation from Rice University, which he obtained in 2014, to what he called intentional changes in Quran manuscripts. That is the title. I actually don't have a copy of this dissertation, but it is available. If you know about what's called dissertation ProQuests, you can get a copy of it. At some point, perhaps I will do that. But he devoted his entire PhD research to studying what I imagine would be a large corpus of manuscripts. Again, I haven't seen the dissertation. And then studying them very minutely and locating corrections. One can get a glimpse of what I assume is the dissertation. I assume that this material overlaps in Dr. Brubaker's publication known as Corrections in Early Quran Manuscripts. This is available on Amazon. I should say that if you decide to purchase the book, keep in mind that he actually published two versions. One is the full color edition, and one is the black and white edition, because he actually has provided photographs of the corrections in question from the manuscripts that he examined, and I obtained a color copy. It's significantly more expensive, but anyway, that's up to you. And interestingly enough, this book carries a endorsement by, among others, Gerd R. Puyn, who was associated with that article which came out in 1999 in the right-wing neoconservative mouthpiece known as the Atlantic Monthly. What Bible thumpers like Dr. Brubaker and secular Orientalists, as well as Bible-thumping Orientalists, consistently fail to understand or willfully ignore or forget or neglect is that the Quran, first and foremost, is an oral text. And it is an oral and aural phenomenon. Oral, O-R-A-L, and oral, heard, A-U-R-A-L, phenomenon. They consistently ignore or forget or willfully neglect this fundamental point to understanding the Quran. The Quran, the word Quran in Arabic literally means recitation. And any visual representation of the Quran in the form of some kind of Arabic script or publication or published version, some physical object in which there is an agreed upon system of signs, is merely a visual representation of this oral text. And all Muslims know this because every Muslim begins from a very early age memorizing the Quran, and it has always been that way. So when persons of Dr. Brubaker's ilk produce volumes of this sort in which they claim that they have found so many manuscripts and these manuscripts have mistakes in them, this is neither here nor there. And if they have corrections, this also does not in any way challenge the integrity of the Quran. This is something which they constantly fail to understand. When we talk about manuscripts, ancient manuscripts of the Quran, let's say the Sana'a palimpsest, for example, you have to keep in mind that we have no context for these manuscripts. That's very important to understand. I have all sorts of notes here, for example. If I were to throw these notes away somewhere, or if someone were to get their hands on them, they would probably have a very difficult time understanding what is written there, because these are of a personal character. They were not meant to be a public text. So in many of these, instances, we have, in all of these instances, I would say, we have no real way of 100% knowing what is the character of these pages of the Quran. And you have to keep in mind that the majority of these manuscripts are not complete. They're fragments. They don't represent the entire a visual representation of the entire text of the Quran. So we have no idea what the context is behind them. It is certainly possible that someone, while copying out the Quran, would have made a mistake. It can happen. Now, we have no idea if that person was aware of the mistake, or if they decide, this page is a mess, I'm just going to put it aside and start again and write another page. And there is an aspect of the Muslim veneration for the written text of the Quran as well. And Muslims will tend not to throw that kind of a thing away. So even if you have, let's say, a printed copy of the Quran, and it's only in English that we say, oh, this Quran or that Quran. In Arabic, it's a mushaf. Technically, strictly speaking, it's not the Quran. It's a mushaf. It's a codex. And so if you have a printed copy of the Quran, you are not supposed to disrespect it. You can't leave it lying on the floor. If generally it's placed in a place of respect and reverence in the household, on a high shelf, for example, and should over the years it wear out, one doesn't throw it away. People often, they bury them, or they put them, or they just store them away somewhere and don't look at them. And then years go by, and the years turn into decades and centuries, and then you find the Sana'a manuscripts. And so even if they have pages where maybe there is a mistake, if part of it is still correct, they will keep it. So you have no idea what you've actually found and what the character is of those manuscripts. So at best, I think all that Brubaker establishes is that, well, there are these manuscripts around the world. They have mistakes in them, and lo and behold, Muslims corrected them. So what? At best, he has provided a detailed study of Muslim proofreading, and so he himself is a proofreader's proofreader. Now, if these manuscripts were corrected, what were they being corrected according to? I would again argue according to the oral tradition, memory. And in some cases he says, oh, there's like a tape has been applied or something has been scraped away. Well, sometimes these manuscripts could have been damaged and they could have been repaired. Again, all I can say to him is, so what? So this whole question of manuscripts I believe to be really a complete and total red herring. I think that especially the thumpers out there, they would like very much for the transmission history of the Quran to be a kind of narrative or a story which is similar to or matches their own. Because they cannot hide from the fact, even Jay Smith admits in one of his videos, about how the Bible has actually undergone various changes, that there is a human element, that they have various manuscripts, and he acknowledges that there's something called textual criticism and higher criticism, and that the Bible has been subjected to this, and so that they admit that there are all these errors, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the key thing for them is Jesus. Well, all right, that's I suppose that's a point of view. But they want that same sort of history to have repeated itself with other scriptures, and in this case, the Quran. And it's just not the case. It simply isn't true. These manuscript finds do not prove anything. The Quran, as it is today, as it has been in every generation, is memorized. You have this in every single Muslim household, and this is what was happening from the very beginning. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ memorized. He learned by heart from the angel Gabriel, Jibreel alayhi salam, directly, and he instituted a system whereby the Quran was also was written down, but also memorized. It was written in whatever form, whatever was available, but memorization was the key. And that has repeated itself in every single generation, and is taking place now. And the Quran is perpetually recited, perpetually. There are radio stations in the Muslim world. In almost every Muslim country, there's something called Ida'at al-Quran al-Kareem, which is a kind of broadcast of the Quran 24/7, all the time. So the Quran is first and foremost an oral text, and it has many oral dimensions, which are also reflected in the qira'at, which I will talk about in due course. So I would simply conclude this portion by saying that this kind of manuscript evidence is of no consequence whatsoever. And if there are manuscripts there which have mistakes in them, the only reason we know that they're mistakes is because, again, we have the oral tradition. And moreover, if there have been corrections added to the by Muslims to such manuscripts, either at the time or in a different pen indicating someone else or at a later date, it simply shows that they took care of these manuscripts and they took care to correct them when needed. So at best, Professor or Dr. Brubaker has provided us with an extensive catalog of Islamic proofreading. So before moving to a discussion of the qira'at, or the different recitations of the Quran, the vast oral tradition of Quran recitation, I would like to add a couple of points regarding the study of the manuscript tradition of the Quran. Now, Brubaker does not provide a bibliography in this book. He has a list of further reading, and I understand that this is meant to be a work of, shall we say, popularization, in the sense that it is meant for a wider, non-scholarly readership. So that's fine. So I do not know if he is aware of this research, but I would like to point out, for those of you who would like to investigate this further, and you can't learn everything on YouTube and something from a video, not even this video, you have to go and you have to learn and you have to research and you have to read, and you really need to have a knowledge of Arabic. But there is a lot of scholarly attention that has been given to manuscripts as well. And in this regard, I'm going to mention a few papers. You can maybe find them online. If you have access to a library at some point when everything opens up after this whole COVID drama is over, then you can follow up on this. So among the most important scholars, especially with respect to the Sana'a finds, is a professor at Stanford University. He went to Princeton, studied with Michael Cook, of Iranian origin. That would be Behnam Sadiqi, and he has a paper called Sana'a 1 that refers to one cache of manuscripts and the origins of the Quran. This was published in the famous German journal Der Islam in Band 87, or volume 87, number 8. That's 2012, pages 1 to 129. I am pretty sure I have PDFs of all of these, and I can maybe even find links and upload them. Add them in the comment section or in the description section, excuse me, or maybe provide a link to a Google Drive. But I will do my best after this. I'm done making this video. Also, Michael Cook, and I did study with him at Princeton. This is the book which we alluded to, called Hagerism, The Making of the Islamic World, which he co-authored with now the late Patricia Crone. Here's the autograph. Michael Cook is my autographed copy. So Cook has revised his position on the Quran. He has a paper which he wrote, and then he revised that view as well. The paper was called A Quranic, of course he writes with a K, a Quranic Codex inherited by Malik from his father. This is a reference to the famous Muslim jurist Malik ibn Anas, who is also the compiler of the Muwatta, and he inherited a Musahif, a Quranic codex, from his grandfather. And so this appeared in the Proceedings of the 6th International Congress of Greco-Oriental and African Studies, volume 7 to 8, which was 1999 to 2000. It appears on pages 93 to 105. Then he revises his view again, and he publishes a paper called The Stemma of the Regional Codices of the Quran. Very important paper, published in Greco-Arabica, number 9 and 10, appeared in 2004, pages 89 to 104. I think he's Dutch, Dutch scholar Harold Motzki, H-A-R-A-L-D-M-O-T-Z-K-I or M-O-T-Z-K-I, The Collection of the Quran, a Reconsideration of Western Views in Light of Recent Methodological Developments. Also in Der Islam, Band 78, that's volume 78, number 8, appeared 2001, pages 1 to 34. Also in this regard, there has been some very important research done on one of the very early if not the earliest copies or codices of the Quran, compiled by the famous figure of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam. And these are by the Turkish scholar Saifuddin Qara, or Kara, K-A-R-A. So we have the collection of the Quran in early Shiite discourse, the traditions ascribed to Imam Abu Ja'far Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam in the JRAS, or the Journal of the Royal Asiatic Society. That would be volume 26, number 3, July 2016, pages 375 to 406. And then he has, in the Journal of Near Eastern Studies, published by the University of Chicago, The Suppression of Ali ibn Abi Talib's Codex, study of the traditions on the earliest copies of the Quran. Now, I have pagination for this, pages 267 to 289, but I accessed this online, so I'm not sure which volume and number of JNES, or Journal of the Near Eastern Studies of University of Chicago, was published in. I think it was in 2016. Saifuddin Qara has since then also authored a book on the Codex of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which I have only heard of, but I have not yet seen. So these are important. I think these are an important number of studies which will be of interest to people who want to further explore these ideas. All right, so then if we turn now to the qira'at tradition. So on the one hand, you have this manuscript tradition, which persons like Brubaker and others have looked at. And then you have the oral tradition, or what are called al-qira'at. And as I said, the word Quran in Arabic literally means, or comes from a root, which means to read out loud or to recite. Qara'a yaqra'u. Excuse me. So the word Quran itself means recitation. And there is a hadith, sometimes in English they use the word tradition. The word in Arabic is hadith, of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, a hadith is an account of either a statement of the Prophet Muhammad, or sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or an account describing something he did, an act, or something which was done in his presence of which he tacitly approved. That's what a hadith is. It's an account of those things. So in the case of a statement, it may also not be a verbatim statement. It may be what's called a naql bil ma'na, or the person who is the narrator of the hadith is just giving in his own words what the Prophet ﷺ is purported to have said. In the case of the 12 or Shīʿah Muslims, they expand this to include not just the Prophet ﷺ, but also the 12 Imams of their tradition, in addition to Fatima az-Zahra alayhi salam, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. A hadith is composed of a chain of narrators, what's called an isnad, and a matn, or the actual text of the hadith. Now, that's important to understand. And again, hadith is often called tradition with a T in popular writing on Islam, but also now even in academic writing by specialists, Orientalists. So there is a famous hadith or tradition which exists in many different versions, which states that the Quran has been revealed according to 7 letters, is the literal translation, but the word in Arabic is ahruf. And there is a lot of discussion in the Muslim scholarly literature on exactly what this means, but in the final analysis, it simply comes down to the following, and that is that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ permitted a multiplicity of, shall we say, ways or styles of reading the Quran. And that all of these, on the authority of that hadith, have the approval of heaven, as it were, divine approval. So the idea that there are multiple and different ways of reciting the Quran is there and has been there since the beginning. So we have different qira'at as they came to be known. And they are known by the names associated with certain reciters. So the most famous qira'ah which we find in the Muslim world right now in terms of sheer numbers and geographic spread is known as the qira'ah of Hafs an Asim. So, strictly speaking, it is the qira'ah of Asim in the riwayah of Hafs, but I'm not going to bother too much here with these very fine technical details. So, just for short, it's known as Hafs an Asim. And especially in North Africa, by which I mean Morocco, Algeria, I think Tunisia as well, you will find the qira'ah of Nafi' in the riwayah or the narration of Warsh, or simply Warsh an Nafi'. You also find, for example, in Libya, I think also in Yemen, parts of Yemen, Qalun an Nafi'. These are the names of the people associated with these qira'at. In West Africa, I think also in Sudan, parts of Sudan, you will find the qira'ah of Abu Amr, or what through the riwayah of Ad-Duri, so it's known as Ad-Duri an Abi Amr. You wouldn't say Abu Amr if you put an an, it becomes Abi Amr. That's important to mention because a lot of these thumpers really have no idea about Arabic. And we will give you a very good example of that in due course. So these qira'at are in circulation, and they have been in circulation for a very, very long time. Indeed, I would say they ultimately go all the way back to the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as I said, according to this hadith, then you can make the argument that they have a divine sanction. These qira'at have been known about for a very, very long time. They have been studied by Muslims. And we indeed have many printed copies, modern printed copies of the Quran that often feature these qira'at. They're not suppressed or hidden. It's true that if you buy a mushaf in most parts of the Muslim world, because of the popularity of this qira'ah, you will find Hafs an Asim. So I'm just going to get a few mushafs and show them to you. So here's a bunch of different masahif. They are not Qur'ans. Take careful note, Mr. Smith and Hatun Tash and company. These are masahif. This mushaf is your standard sort of Hafs an Asim qira'ah. And at the end of every mushaf, you have some sort of a description of it. So here is ta'arifun bihadal mushaf al-sharif. So they describe, what is going on. And so they'll mention here, for example, كتب هذا المصحف وضبط على ما يوافق رواية حفص بن سليمان بن المغيرة الأسدي الكوفي لقراءة عاصم, etc., etc. So it tells you right there that this mushaf was written out in a system of writing, a system of visual representation conforming to the riwayah, the narration of Hafs of the qira'ah of Asim. Now there's a stamp here at the end. In every printed mushaf in the Muslim world, there's always some sort of a lajnatul muraja'ah. That is to say, a committee that yes, Mr. Brubaker proofreads the Quran. And if they find any that are no good, then they don't pass them. So you will see that in this mushaf, there's all sorts of things. And each of these little symbols means something. So if you have here, for example, Inna ja'alnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum. You will notice that the tanween here is written a certain way, and the tanween here is written a certain way. That means something different in the qira'ah, according to the rules of tajweed. And there's no way you can figure that out unless you have learned it from someone who has recited it to you and told you what to do. If you don't know Arabic, you just come and you might read this as ham. That's hamim. So you have to learn that from someone. And you can't just read this as Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. for example. So you have to learn that from somebody. So this is a standard Hafs an Asim Mus'haf that was published at the King Fahd complex in Medina. This is a Warsh an Nafi'. It was printed in Beirut, Darul Mus'haf, Beirut, not printed in Morocco. But you will see that it has its own system of visual representation. And this writing here is it's a version anyway of what's called Al-Khatt al-Maghribi, which you find in North Africa. So there's differences. So here it says, so those of you who are, novices in Arabic, this is not Al-Fur'an. I hope Mr. Smith is paying attention. This is Al-Qur'an. Al-Qur'anul Kareem. Because in the Maghribi script, Qaf is represented by one dot below and Fa by a one dot below. So here it says, Qul fa'anna. So there's a different system, and all these muds and other things, they indicate different lengthenings and shortenings and so forth. So I think I've got another Warsh an Nafi' here. Here's another Warsh an Nafi'. This was printed in, what was Libya. That's a big mess right now. Well, what used to be Libya. So this is another Warsh an Nafi'. And again, if you go to the back, there's explanations. At-ta'rif bihadha al-mushaf al-sharif. Again, a description of this mushaf. Notice it doesn't say at-ta'rif bihadha al-Qur'an. It says at-ta'rif bihadha al-mushaf al-sharif. So the various stops and things are explained. And again, you have a stamp here saying that this thing has been passed. And this looks to me like the reprint of the one that was printed, the one that was here from Lebanon, which is why it probably says, yeah, this is a Sheikh Muhammad Ali al-Juzu, Mufti Jabal Lubnan. It's interesting. I met this guy once a long time ago in Cairo. Funny, I didn't realize that. So this is the Mufti of Jabal Lubnan. Anyhow, so you have to have some sort of a committee or some people who sign off on a mushaf. Here's another one. There's another Hafs an Asim. It's a little different. This one is from Iran. Same situation here. Again, you're going to have a stamp. See, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna nahnu nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun. And then you've got all this here, and then this is Dar Tarikh, this as Jihat al-Sihat Kitabat wa Intibaq ba Qira'at Asim bi Riwayat Hafs Dar Idara Nazarat Bar Chap wa Nashr Qur'ani Kareem Barasi, etc., etc., etc. Of course, that's all written in Persian because it was in Iran. I don't have, I have one somewhere, but I couldn't find it. I have a mushaf from Malaysia as well, and the notes at the end are all in classical Malay. I can't find that one right at the moment. Okay, so here, look, here's a mushaf with qira'at in it. So here it says, Al-Qur'anul Kareem, Al-Qira'at al-Ashra al-Mutawatira. So it says, actually, it's smaller print here. It says, Fi Hamish al-Qur'an al-Kareem. So it says, it's got the Qur'an here. In other words, it means it's got Hafs an Asim, and then it's got your qira'at here in the margins. So you see, Muslims are publishing this. Here, where was this one published? Dar. It says Dar al-Muhajir lil-Nashr wa-Tawzi'. Okay, where is that? It's probably Lebanon or Syria. Let's see. Dimashq, Damascus. So this has the 10 readings. It's been published in the Muslim world. You've got a committee again who's signing off on the mushaf. There's some sort of khatima. There's some sort of here explanation of what it's here and seeing. Here it says that this mushaf was checked. That means everything. All the 10 were checked by all of these guys from these different countries. So here's the Syrian Arab Republic. Here's the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. All these guys had signed off on it so that this mushaf can circulate in their countries. So I don't think that any of these chaps here, had a crisis of faith when they were preparing this mushaf. And I don't think, they've all these people have apostatized. But here you are. This is published in the Muslim world. It's not banned in the Muslim world. It's available there. There's no qira'at conundrum here, Mr. J. Smith. Here is another one. الكامل المفصل في القراءات الأربعة عشر. Yeah, if Mr. Smith doesn't understand what I'm saying, he needs to take an Arabic class. I cannot help him. الكامل المفصل في القراءات الأربعة عشر. It's got the 14 readings. Okay, بهامش مصحف القرآن التعليمي. This was prepared under the supervision of Al-Ustad al-Daktur, Doctor Professor. I have that custom in Arabic, it's like in German, Herr Dr. Professor Ahmad Isa al-Ma'sarawi, شيخ عموم المقارئ المصرية ورئيس لجنة المصحف بالأزهر الشريف وأستاذ الحديث وعلومه بجامعة الأزهر. So this gentleman, Dr. Professor Ahmad Isa al-Ma'sarawi, is the sheikh, the head scholar of the Quran readers of Egypt, and he is the head of the Mus'haf committee, the published or printed Quran committee of the Al-Azhar University or Seminary located in Cairo, Egypt. He's also professor of Hadith and its sciences at Al-Azhar. So here again, we've got all the qira'at here. No big deal. Ma'sarawi has not crossed over to the cross because he had a crisis of faith. Whether you have a crisis of faith at Al-Azhar or at Yale, like some person. I didn't have a crisis of faith at Princeton. So nothing has happened. We have this, again, published in the Muslim world. And again, you go to the back. You have all the alamat al-waqf, which are explained here. Here you have very important document from Al-Azhar's Directorate of Research, Majma' al-Buhuth al-Islamiyya. Again, you've got all these people who checked this. And again, here's the key stamp and the tamgha, the various other fees have been rendered and whatnot, and so everyone has signed off on this mushaf as well. Here's another nice one. This is this was published in Libya before it fell apart. This is Qalun. This should be Qalun an Nafi'. Yeah, Qalun. Qalun an Nafi'. There's his name, everything explained there. And once again, Lajnat, A'dad, wa Kitabat Mushaf al-Jamahiriyya, as it's called. So all of these eminent scholars of the Quran there would have had to have signed off, and in fact here they give a facsimile of their signatures. And so I wanted to make another point. You have this Hafs an Asim, for example. Let's say that's page 215, okay? And this is another Hafs an Asim. Let's go. The paginations should match it. These two is the same. Let's say, okay, page 215. Yeah. وَلَوْ أَنَّ لِكُلِّ نَفْسٍ. Here you are. So if you look at these two pages in comparison, you will see that here there are a lot of colors. All right, here you have this thing is a kind of orange hue. This is red. This is green. You've got some blues. These all indicate certain rules of recitation or tajweed. This colorization scheme did not exist in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It didn't exist when I was a child, when I was learning to memorize the Quran. This is recent. I don't know how soon it came out. I first came across it, I don't know, maybe in the 1990s or the early part of the 21st century of the Gregorian calendar. And so this is another further evolution and development in the visual representation of the Quran to help people who are learning so they know how long to stretch out this alif, for example, or what you're supposed to do with this jim. And there are various rules of tajweed and all that. And again, if you don't know those symbols, if I just tore this page out and threw it somewhere, astaghfirullah, and some great-great-grandson of Daniel Allen Brubaker digs it up or finds it in a museum and then tries to figure out what it is, he's not going to know what it is. The Quran is first and foremost an oral tradition. It is an oral text. If you want to learn how to recite this, you have to sit at the feet of someone who will teach you, and it takes a long time. That's why people start early in the Muslim world. They start when they are children. So the point is that, again, the Quran is an oral text, and these qira'at are there in the Muslim world. The sab'at ahruf tradition, or 7 ahruf, which simply means a multiplicity or plurality of ways of, or modes or modalities of recitation, have been recognized by Muslims for centuries. It's never been a point of controversy, ever. It's never been the cause of some sort of apostatization or something like this. And these things are learned. They are transmitted in other books. There's a famous text. Here they are. These are famous qira'at works. This is the famous An-Nashr fil Qira'at al-Ashr. This is a major text which is studied. There are many, many editions of this. This is by Ibn al-Jazari, who died in 833 of the Hijrah. This is the book on the Qira'at. This is the famous Ibn Mujahid, Kitab al-Sab'a fil Qira'at al-Ashr. Again, this is published in Egypt, Dar al-Ma'arif, edited by Shawqi Daif, rahimahullah. He didn't have a crisis of faith. This book is published in Cairo. It's not been banned there. It's in circulation. It's available to one and all. Here's another, Al-Mabsut fil Qira'at al-Ashr by Al-Isbahani, died 381. This is a famous text. Here, شرح شعلة على الشاطبية المسمى كنز المعاني شرح رز المعاني. This is a text in the form of a poem which is memorized by people who memorize all of these readings. It's a mnemonic, and there is a full-blown institute in Cairo for the study of all of these qira'at and the memorization of these qira'at. This is well known to scholars. If you look, I could take out even more books. If you look in the tafsir of Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, for example, who died 310 of the Hijrah, he mentions this qira'ah and that qira'ah and so on and so forth. The tafsir that has the biggest devotion, or commentary, tafsir means commentary on the Quran, the one that is devoted most, the one who devoted the most assiduous attention to these qira'at was Abu Hayyan al-Gharnati in his famous tafsir al-Bahr al-Muhit. It's full of different qira'at. Go and read it. Never a cause of controversy, never a big deal. No one is apostatizing. There's no mass conversion to Christianity, a crossing over to the cross. None of that is happening. None of that is happening. If you look at Majma' al-Bayan by At-Tabarsi, if you look at Tafsir at-Tibyan by Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Tusi, these guys all talk about these things. There is even Kitab al-Hujjah fi Ilal al-Qira'at by al-Farisi. His death date is uncertain, but he's also like 4th century of the Hijrah. There are other mentions of the Qira'at in these very early works of Arabic linguistics and lexicography. The famous lexicographer and scholar of Arabic poetry and all-around linguistic genius, Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi, who died in the year 170 or 175, it's disputed his death date. He wrote the first dictionary in Arabic called Kitabul Ain, which means the source or the wellspring. So it's the wellspring of the Arabic language. He cites qira'at in his book. His pupil, Sibawayh, the author of the book that is simply known as Al-Kitab, the book of Arabic grammar and linguistics, cites different qira'at. And indeed, any of these works of Arabic linguistics, even the later ones, the Alfi ibn Malik, the Sharaf ibn Aqil, Ibn Hisham al-Ansari, all these guys. And if you are listening to this and you are a Bible thumper and you have not heard of these books, then go and get an education. Learn some Arabic. Respect yourself. If you don't know what you're talking about, احترم نفسك يا رجل واسكت. Respect yourself and be quiet. So if you look in these texts, you will find a constant reference and discussion of qira'at, and it's never been a matter of controversy. Now, if certain Muslim preachers and polemicists who like to have debates with thumpers, if they are not aware of these facts, such as Shabbir Ali seems not to have been, and they end up digging themselves in a hole and humiliating themselves, that's their own problem. I can't do anything about that. So the fact is that genuine Muslim scholars, and not just popular preachers, and to be fair, we cannot expect everyone to be an expert on these matters. It would be like, expecting just someone who makes ordinary use of technology to be acquainted with deep knowledge of physics. But there are people out there who have Nobel Prizes in physics. You don't have to know all of the deep scientific details of how an iPhone works to use it. But there are people there who do know, at any rate. So this is a key point to understand, that these qira'at have never been a point of controversy in the way that J. Smith would like to make it out, and to mislead Muslims who are not aware of these things through making the kinds of statements and remarks which he does in his videos. And just to show you the absolute depth of incompetence of this man, I am going to analyze just one, مثال واحد فقط, one simple example from one of his videos, which shows you that he has absolutely, that he's just out of his depth. So I'm going to play a clip of that now, and then we will look at it in detail.
In the Hafs translation, or version, it has Barayati. Barayati.
What language is this?
Barayati is the word you can see underlined in green. Creatures. In the Warsh, which is the one that's used in North Africa, it's the Al-Asbahani version of the Warsh, because there's more than one. The word is Al-Barayati. Barayati, with the glottal stop there. Underlined in ya. You can see there that's completely, it is a different word, especially at the end. So that refers to as the innocent. So the translation in the Hafs would be, indeed they who disbelieved among the people of the scriptures and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. Those are the worst of creatures. So it's talking about us, really, Christians. In the Warsh, which is popular in North Africa, the translation would say, indeed, they who disbelieved among the people of the scriptures, that's us, and the polytheists, those are the heathens, will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. Those are the worst of the innocent. Well, now, there are two problems here. One is, are Christians the worst creatures, or are we innocent? And if we are innocent, what are we, along with the Jews and the polytheists, doing in hell? So that has a theological problem. You could do a doctoral thesis just on that.
Oh, really?
All right, so as you saw in that clip, if you have any appreciation of the Arabic language, you will see that J. Smith cannot even pronounce it properly. He just butchers it, makes a complete mess. I mean, honestly, it's embarrassing. It really is. It shows that he is so completely out of his depth. Now, you could argue, well, Arabic, there's these classical languages, you really don't have to have it's enough to have a reading knowledge and so on and so forth. I suppose, but, he's trying to talk about the Quran here, and he's talking about readings, qira'at of those. And a qira'ah is a recitation. So if you cannot even pronounce the word properly, and you've got some bizarre transliteration on your PowerPoint slide that you've put up there, I have no idea what transliteration system that is. And if you're going to be working in this, and you want to do things in a scholarly way, you should follow one of the proper systems of transliteration. Choose one, Jay, and stick to it. What was that? That was a mess. Looked like you got some random Egyptian fruit seller or something to write that for you. It makes no sense at all. I suggest you consult the Chicago Manual of Style, refer to something, and figure out what your transliteration system is. For your information, there's two major ones. There's the one used in the Anglophone world. You can look that up in the International Journal of Middle East Studies. And there's a European one. Refer to Der Islam. At any rate, the surah in question is Suratul Bayyinah, which is the 98th surah, and he's referring to a verse there, an ayah, which says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين في نار جهنم خالدين فيها أولئك هم, and this is the key part, هم شر البرية. That's how it's pronounced in Hafs and Asim and others. هم شر البرية. It means, indeed, the faithless from among the people of the book and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell to remain in it forever. It is they who are the worst of creatures. Now, this English translation of the meaning of the Quran, which I've just read to you, is the one by Ali Quli Qara'i. Whoops. Published by Tahriq Tarsil al-Quran, etc., etc. New York. This is the third U.S. edition, 2017. Now, this is a good translation of the Quran. If you really know Arabic, then you can see that there are issues in every translation. None can really do justice, but there are different translations, and this is a very good one. The reason this is very convenient is that each little passage of text, each little portion is matched up with the English. So the part that he's focusing on, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ شَرُّ الْبَرِيَّةِ, quite providential that it should be this verse. It is they who are the worst of creatures. And he's saying that this bariyya, this is what he said, according to his, is there in Warsh, is there in Hafs and Asim. And then in Warsh, this is, this Mus'haf made an appearance earlier. We have, it's before that. So this is split over on 2 pages. It starts here, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ شَرُّ الْبَرِيَّةِ. So here we have, let's just now dispense with the English translation. So we have here, I lost my place. We have here Sharrul Bari'a. Bari'a. This is Warsh an Nafi'. And I'll show you in Hafs. This is Hafs in the center. This is the Ma'sarawi prepared Mus'haf prepared under Ma'sarawi, which we showed you earlier, that has the 14. In the center, the central page, we have Hafs an Asim. This is Surah Al-Bayyinah. It's the 98th surah. 8 ayahs. And we are in this ayah here. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ شَرُّ الْبَرِيَّةِ. All right, this is Hafs an Asim. Now, you go here into the margin, and you will see the discussions of these different readings. So here it says Bariyya, right? So here you refer to this word, and it says قَرَأَ نَافِعْ وَابْنُ ذَكْوَانَ الْبَرِيَّةِ بِالْهَمْزِ فِيهِمَا. Here it means that the reader known as Nafi', as well as the reader known as Ibn Dhakwan, or the reciter, Nafi', the reciter known as Nafi' and the reciter known as Ibn Dhakwan, both read this word as al-bari'ah with a hamza, or a glottal stop, by making a glottal stop in both instances. What does it mean, both instances? Because the word repeats. So here it's referring to those people who are in hell as sharrul bariyya. And then here it's إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمْ خَيْرُ الْبَرِيَّةِ. So the word, as you can see here, occurs twice. So he's saying that in both instances, Ibn Dhakwan and Nafi' read it as bari'ah. And he goes on explaining here. And then he says that this, with the hamza, it comes from the root in Arabic, bara'a. Bara'a. Which means to create. So in the sentence, you give the example, Bara'allahu al-khalqa. Allah created the creation. Now, I don't know if J. Smith studied his own scripture and had to go and learn Greek and Hebrew, but he should have known this one because it has a Hebrew cognate. And it's the first is the opening lines of Genesis, or as Bereshith, as it's known. Bereshith bara Elohim. So that bara there is cognate to this bara'a. And that's why it says, bara Allahu al-khalq ay khalaqahum. So bari'a actually means al-khaliqa, the creation, and not the innocent as he thinks. That's in, all of the other reciters. They read recited as al-bariyya. It says here al-bilba al-tahtiyya al-mushaddada. Sorry, bilya. Excuse me, bilya al-tahtiyya al-mushaddada, which means with the letter ya, that has two dots underneath and has a shadda, or is doubled. Ala takhfif al-hams, by lightening the glottal stop. And it says وذلك لكثرة الاستعمال فيه فأكثر العرب يستعملونها مخفف الهمزة. And he says, that he's saying that this is because this word is used a lot, and so people tended to relax the hamza and recite and pronounce it as bariyya. So that's what you have there. And again, like if you refer to other sources like Al-Bahr al-Muhit, I mentioned this by Abu Hayyan al-Gharnati. He was from Spain, died in 745 of the Hijrah. This is his tafsir. If you go here, he also explains this and explains the different roots. So this would be a bit of some overkill, but he has explained this here. And the same thing is what he says here is repeated in another source, which I want to show you because I didn't mention it earlier. This is in 8 volumes. Pay close attention, Mr. Smith. معجم القراءات القرآنية. So this is the dictionary of Quranic qira'ats. All right, and it's in 8 volumes. And again, published in the Muslim world. This was first published in Kuwait. This is a reprint. This is a reprint that was printed in, I think it was printed in Iran, yeah. Yep. So this is very useful. It has all the qira'at here, and it's arranged chart-wise. So you come here, Suratul Bayyinah, which is the 98th surah. Then you go through, this is the Raqamul Ayah, and it has a consecutive numbering as well. And then it'll give you the Hafs and Asim, what's there in the most widely spread Masahif. Then the different ways of reciting, and the reciter, and a source. Very important. The source for the qira'ah. So here, and again, we've shown you that the word bariyya in Hafs and Asim occurs twice, so it gives you this number here. We're at, entry number 10,145. And then it says Awjahul Qira'ah, so there's another Qira'ah, which is Bari'ah, which is written there, and there's a footnote, which we're going to look at. And then it says Nafi ibn Amr ibn Dhakwan al-A'raj. Tells you everybody. And it gives you the sources here. Bunch of them. So here again it cites some other texts, some other sources. There's a thing in manuscript here, and then this is the Tahbir al-Taysir. This is the Tafsir of al-Alusi. But what we're interested in here, it says قيل هو الأصل من برأهم الله تعالى بمعنى ابتدأهم فهي فعيلة بمعنى مفعولة. So again, this is from the verb bara'a, in the sense that Allah created them, in the sense that He originated them, ibtada'ahum. And then this is a grammatical note that bariyya has the pattern of fa'ila in the sense of maf'ula, in the sense of a, what is that called in English? Passive participle. So fa'ila also can be a form of the passive participle, it means in Arabic. لكن عامة العرب إلا أهل مكة التزموا تسهيل الهمزة بالإبدال والإدغام or والإدغام فقالوا البرية كما قالوا الذرية. So it says here that most of the Arabs, except the people of Mecca, followed a kind of easing out of the hamza and saying bariya instead of bari'a. And so that hamza was changed. That's what ibdal and idgham or idgham means here. And so they would say al-bariya, like the word dhurriya. Dhurriya meaning one's descendants in Arabic. وقيل ليس بالأصل وإنما البرية بغير همز من البر المقصور يعني التراب. So another derivation etymologically of this, rather from the root bara'a, referring to creation, refers to another root which means, here it would mean the sense of earth. Or so in Arabic we speak of al-barr wal-bahr, land and sea. We speak of al-barraniya, the outside of a house, meaning an open expanse of land. And that's why in Egyptian Arabic they'll say get out, itla' barra. You know, like you do something bad in school, our teachers would say in Egypt itla' barra, for example. So one may want to say itla' barra at this point to Mr. Smith anyway. So it has the sense of at-turab, or dirt or dust. And what that means then is that if you go with, in either case it means al-khaliqa, it means the creation. But if you go with bariya, it's the creation in general. In other words, jinn and mankind and angels, everything. Whereas if you go with bari'a, it would be just those which are created from earth or from dust, which would be Adam alayhi salam, which would be humankind. Now the problem is that Mr. Smith says that in the Warsh and other readings, he for some reason says this is just Warsh and Isbahani, and I don't know what he's going off on there. But anyway, the point is that he says that no, this is bari'a means innocent. Ayyuhal jahil. It does not mean innocent here. It simply doesn't. You don't know about sarf. You don't know about the morphological root system in Arabic. Moreover, you have no understanding whatsoever of grammar. Let's do this again. We need a Masahif here. We'll just use this one here. Here's a good text. The text as it appears in the Tafsir Bahr al-Mu'id. So let's look at what's going on here. It says, "Inna alladhina kafaru, min ahli al-kitabi wal mushrikeen." It's plural all the way through. "Fi nari jahannam khalidina fiha ulaika hum sharrul bariyah." Well, let's be accurate. He wants us to go with Warsh. Okay, fine. That was Hafsan Asim. I stand corrected. Aywa. Okay. So notice it's plural. Inna alladhina kafaru. Indeed, in truth, without a doubt, those who have disbelieved. Min ahli al-kitabi. From the people of the book. It actually means those who are recipients of prior scripture. Yani al-Yahud wal-Nasara, the Jews and Christians. Wal-Mushrikeen. And those who associate partners with God. Polytheists, idol worshippers. Fi nari jahannam, are in the fire of hell. Khalidina fiha, therein they shall abide forever. Ulaika, again plural. And then hum, for emphasis. Ulaika, they indeed are none other than the worst of creation. He says bariya means innocent. Let's just entertain this hypothesis of J. Smith for a moment. Let's say it means that. Then why is it in the form bari'a? It is true, if you take a different derivation, you can say that yes, someone who in Arabic, if they are innocent of, let's say, of a crime, if they're innocent of some wickedness or of some malfeasance, you would say that yes, so and so is bari'un. But then that would be the masculine singular. You must say rajulun bari'un wa imra'atun bari'atun. And if it's plural, there's at least three ways of going about it. If we want to emphasize that it's a group entirely grammatically masculine, a group of men, so you could say bari'un. If it's all women, you could say bari'at. That's the sound feminine plural, the sound masculine plural, or you do the broken plural. What is the broken plural of bari'un, J. Smith? It is abriya. Yes, pay close attention. Write that down or have one of your assistants note it down for you. So then it should read, if it means innocent, ulaika hum Sharrul Abriya. So you have no clue what you're doing. That's absolutely wrong. This indicates that you do not have a knowledge of the Arabic language. You are not even a novice or a dilettante. You are just misleading people, and no one should pay any attention to you or your bizarre lucubrations on the topic of the qira'at of the Quran. Now, in another video, Mr. Smith has made certain statements regarding Hafs an Asim in which he either has misrepresented the case or simply lied or once again has no idea what he is doing. So I'm going to show you, I'll show you a clip of what I have in mind here, and then I'll explain once again where, if we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, he's gone wrong or has willfully misrepresented the situation or something like that.
Conclusions. Hafs' transmissions were unreliable, weak, untrustworthy, contained objectionable material, contained fabricated chains, his traditions disappeared, he was a liar, his transmissions were not recorded by others, and others avoided.
Very well, you've seen the clip. Now, I do think that we've only got a few possibilities here. Either J. Smith has willfully misrepresented what he has said there in the source that he's quoted from, which means that he's lied, or he just didn't know what he was doing, and I really can't be certain which it is. Either way, it still is pretty serious and undermines very much his reservations about Hafs. He introduces that slide by saying, I have 5 problems, I think he says, with Hafs. Yeah, as though you even know anything about the subject. You do not even know a single surah of the Quran by heart, I would venture to say. And here you are pontificating on the qira'at and the qurra and the people who transmit these qira'at. So, after that slide, he proceeds to make a number of assertions and allegations, regarding Hafs. And he says he's unreliable, he's untrustworthy, he wasn't reliable in transmitting the tradition. It's a very important word, tradition. I said earlier to remember that word when I was talking about hadith. Now, if you look closely at that slide and the subsequent slides, because then he proceeds to bring forth supporting statements for the claims that he has made. And he himself never, not even on one occasion, does he explicitly speak the name of his source. He does not explicitly cite where he is getting this material from. And unless you are very punctilious about it, you wouldn't notice. If you were not aware of these things, you might think, wow, this guy really has a tremendous knowledge. Where did he dig all this up? What erudition. And you would be wrong. You would be mistaken. And it is this kind of, and I would say that here he is definitely guilty of deception. It's much like when you purchase something and they give you some sort of a contract. Let's say you go and you lease a car. And most people don't read the fine print because it's, on the one hand, it's very, very fine. And even if they did read it, they probably wouldn't understand it. And it's really long and it takes a long time. It's also like the terms and conditions. You just click them. People don't notice. So in very, very tiny font at the bottom of the slide, very, very tiny font. It looks like a line of ants crawling under the slide. He cites a source. And the source that he is citing is the prolegomena to the Quran. And then he says, New York and Oxford, Oxford University Press, 1998, pages 95 to 96. And then he says that this book was written by Abul Qasim al-Khu'i, which is true. And then he says NB, capital N, capital B, which is an abbreviation for the Latin nota bene, meaning note well, that the author is a Shiite Ayatollah. So when I first saw this, I thought, oh, this is really strange. Where is he getting this? And of course, I paused the screen and I went and I looked very closely. And then I said, aha, that explains everything. Because there's no way, or it's very, very, very unlikely that J. Smith has a profound knowledge of the Muslim literature on al-jarh wa ta'dil and tabaqat and ilm al-rijal and so forth. So what he has done is he's actually quoted this material from this prolegomena, and the translation was by someone named Abdul Aziz Abdul Hussein Satchedina, an East African, an American professor of East African origin. I don't know where he is teaching now. I think back in the day, maybe he's still there. He was at the University of Virginia, and he put together this translation. Well, let's go to the original source. That's what you need to do. You can't rely on translations if you're doing serious research in Islamic studies. The book in question is not prolegomena, blah, blah, blah. It's Al-Bayan fi Tafsir al-Quran by Abul Qasim al-Khu'i. This should be the edition of 1409 Hijri. It is now 1442. We're in the month of Muharram, so we're at the beginning. That's the first month of the year, 1442. So this is a pretty old book. It came out 1988, 1409, published in Baghdad. And this was written indeed as a bunch of it's actually a commentary on the Quran, and this is the volume in which he has all of his preliminary discourses on it, and the commentary on the Quran was never completed. He stopped working on it because there was somebody else named someone else known as Al-Allama Tabatabai, Sayyid Muhammad Husayn Tabatabai, who was writing his own tafsir, Tafsir al-Mizan. At least that's the account I heard, and then he decided to focus on other things because this other scholar was working on his tafsir or commentary on the Quran. So, nevertheless, this portion was published, and you can see here that it says Al-Kitab al-Awwal al-Madkhal. So, that means this is book one of the commentary on the Quran, which never really was completed, and al-Madkhal means the introduction, or the, if you like, the prolegomenon. He said prolegomena, the plural, it doesn't matter. And among the preliminary investigations entered into by Abul Qasim al-Khu'i, there is the matter of the biographical details of the reciters of the Quran. And in doing this, in compiling these biographical details, he has relied on a genre of literature which has to do with the appraisal of the reliability of transmitters of hadith, not Quran. Pay close attention, J. Smith. Transmitters of hadith. And you have to understand that Abul Qasim al-Khu'i was primarily a legal scholar. He was primarily a scholar of Islamic law, fiqh, and usul al-fiqh, the source methodology of Islamic jurisprudence, the philosophy of Islamic law, if you will. He also did a lot of work in the area of ilm al-rijal, that is to say, this particular method of evaluating the reliability of transmitters of hadith. Remember, I told you a hadith has something called an isnad, a chain of narrators, and a matan, the actual text. And in the isnad, you have the names of the people who are the transmitters of this account of either a statement, an action, or a tacit approval of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or if you take the Shia view, that includes the Fatima Zahra alayhi salam and the 12 Imams alayhi salam. And since he was interested in legal studies, he's looking at it from that point of view. So if you actually look at what is said in the Arabic, if we can maybe bring the camera around to this side. So we have this book. Then we come in. You can see here. Adwa'un ala al-qurra. So here he means to shed light, as it were, on the qurra, the Quran reciters, the transmitters of qira'at. You could say. So here's Asim bin Bahdala al-Kufi. So he talks about Asim, then he talks about his transmitter Hafs over here, and then he talks about another transmitter who is known as Shu'bah. All right. So Asim himself is also singled out here. So here it says, so he's quoting various sources, various people again, who were compilers of these works of Rijal. And so here it says, for example, regarding Asim, kana sahibu sunnatin wa qira'ah. So this means that he was a person who was associated with the recitation of the Quran, but also with the Sunnah, presumably Hadith. And here it says, وَكَانَ ثِقَةً, that, he was reliable. When it says thiqa, that reliability refers to the transmission of Hadith. And then it says, رَأْسًا فِي الْقِرَاءَةِ. He was a prominent figure in the recitation of the Quran. It says his death date. And again, there's not really great, there's just very basic sources here. Tahdhib al-Tahdhib. We'll come back to that in a moment. Then he begins with Hafs. And says that, he's Hafs, son of Sulaiman al-Asadi, associated with the tribe of Asad. Kana Rabiba Asim, means that he was the stepchild of Asim. Asim married a woman whose husband presumably had deceased. And she had this child named Hafs, and he raised him and he taught him Quran. Now the key things that he's focusing on, he says, Matrukul Hadith. It says his tradition should be left. Hadith, here, if you translate it as tradition, that he is weak in Hadith. He translates it weak in the tradition. And then it says that the great transmitter of Hadith, An-Nasa'i, presumably didn't relay Hadiths from him. And that he said that he's not reliable and his Hadiths should not be written down. So the question of reliability or unreliability of him has here to do with Hafs as a transmitter of Hadith, not as a reciter of the Quran. And so wherever J. Smith has said tradition, what it says in the original is Hadith. And so الرجل هذا يتلاعب مع النصوص. He's playing with the text. This chap is playing with the texts. Or he doesn't know what he's doing. Doesn't understand that the tradition here doesn't refer to the qira'ah or the recitation of the Quran, but has to do with hadith. And Abul Qasim al-Khu'i was quoting a book called Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, which is an abridgment of a massive encyclopedia of hadith transmitters whose full name was Tahdhib al-Kamal, but Tahdhib al-Kamal was not available to him at the time. Tahdhib al-Kamal is a large book. I have this. It's a 34-volume edition by Bashar Awad Ma'ruf, famous Iraqi Sunni scholar. And he didn't have access to this. And it's interesting that he didn't have access to it. It's very interesting to read the bio here, because you might ask yourself, all right, well, why are these guys hostile to him? Why was he so lousy in hadith? Who knows? That is their assessment. He focused on the Quran. So that is the assessment of those people regarding hadith, not about Quran. You have to also remember that the qira'ah of Asim goes back via Abdul Rahman as-Sulami to Ali bin Abi Talib, alayhi salam. And a lot of these hadith scholars of the Sunni persuasion would always call into question the reliability of people who are transmitting hadith if they seem to them to be of a pro-Ali bent of mind, to the degree that they might be characterized as being Rafidi or Shīʿī or something like this. Now, we don't find an direct evidence of that, which means that they would favor Ali above the other companions. But there is some possibility of that. That may be one reason, I don't know. And that's why the full text of the Tahdhib al-Kamal is important rather than the Tahdhib al-Tahdhib, which means the abridgment of the Tahdhib. And the Tahdhib al-Kamal itself is an abridgment of another much larger work. But anyhow, there's not a lecture on hadith. So if you read in here, near the end of the biography, it says that روى له الترمذي والنسائي في مسند علي, meaning that a Tirmidhi, famous hadith transmitter, also Ibn Majah, and then also An-Nasa'i. These are big names in the big six of the Sunni hadith transmitters. It says here that An-Nasa'i related hadiths from him in a work known as Musnad Ali. In other words, the hadiths that go back to, they're associated with Ali or transmitted by Ali. So that's a possible explanation. It's just a hypothesis. I don't know. But the point is, the takeaway from this, if you like, is that J. Smith has not been entirely transparent in that slide and the material that comes later in that video that begins with that slide, in which he quotes in a rather deceptive way from Al-Bayan fi Tafsir al-Quran by Abul Qasim al-Khu'i. And so from this we can conclude, at the very least, that he's being deceptive. Look, man, if you're doing research, cite your sources, but cite them explicitly. I'm not accusing you of plagiarism, but you wrote it in such tiny font because you probably want people to think that you're such a genius in Islamic studies that you went and dug up all this stuff for yourself, when all you actually did was get a translation, which isn't very good, by the way, which isn't very great, and just used it to cull information from it, which you then presented in a deceptive fashion to present Hafs as though he's a lousy reciter and transmitter of the Quran. And that is just not the case. So at best, you were engaging in deception, or if you want to put it even stronger, you lied. And I really, really think that people who live in glass houses should not throw stones. Have you ever examined your own texts? Or is that something else that you want to cover up? All the Muslims who are watching this and anybody else, you really should go and look at the books of Bart Ehrman. I mean, is there any doubt left in anybody's mind after the works of Bart Ehrman? He's written so many books, there's too many to even cite. All of you right now sitting at your computers, on your devices, just type in Bart Ehrman on Amazon.com and find out all of the books that came out. And he was a serious Bible thumper. He was an evangelical Christian. And he studied New Testament criticism. He's called into question all of this stuff. And he didn't study with some Joe Schmo. He studied with Bruce Metzger, Princeton Theological Seminary. So I really think that those who live in glass houses should not throw stones. Your own text is in such a miserable condition. And by text here, I'm referring specifically to the Gospels in the New Testament. It really boggles the mind that you have these 4 Gospels, each and every single one of them in Greek, a language which Jesus alayhi salam, Isa ibn Maryam, did not speak, and which he would not and could not have addressed the Banu Israel, the children of Israel. By that time, the language of Palestine among the Banu Israel was Aramaic. It wasn't even Hebrew. Hebrew would have been a religious, liturgical, and very important language, but it wasn't the language of everyday discourse. It was Aramaic. Where's the Aramaic gospel? Tell me. You have no clue. It's gone. Right? So when you want to talk about this, you don't even have the original language. And just to give you an example of what a dismal state the Gospels are in, I'm going to show you an example from the gospel according to Mark. This according to is also fascinating. You have the gospel according to John, according to Luke, according to... What is this according to? Where is the actual teaching of Jesus? Ma'akum, ma indkum. It's not there. You guys don't have it. So I'm going to show you an example from the gospel according to Mark, which is truly shocking. And it's remarkable that this anomaly, this peculiar fact about the transmission of the gospel according to Mark is even assented to and admitted to by the most preeminent New Testament critic, the scholar Bruce Metzger. And it's admitted to and assented to with a frankness which is utterly breathtaking. Yes, but before we look at the view according to Bruce Metzger, let us look at some other absolutely breathtaking admissions in this book, The Parallel Gospels According to Ziba A. Crook. Actually, I don't know if this is Ziba or Zeba or what. I mean, that would be like a Persian name, an Iranian name for a girl, a female name. But this says on the back here that Zeba Crook is Associate Professor in Religious Studies at Carleton University. He is the author. So I don't know what's going on there. So this person, Professor Crook, has this to say. This is a collection of parallel gospels, a synopsis of early Christian writing. Now, what I am about to say, and the area I'm about to enter into, has to do with manuscripts. And you might say, well, why are you attacking manuscripts now when you said that Daniel A. Brubaker was mistaken? Yes, he is mistaken. I am not, because the Christians do not have an oral tradition. They do not have a tradition of people memorizing the New Testament, or the Old Testament for that matter. Now, the Jews, for whom the Old Testament isn't old because they don't believe in the New Testament, it's the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, of which stands for the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. And of course, the most important of that is what is in English often called the Pentateuch, or the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. That's the most important. There is a group of people who do recite the Torah constantly. Of course, the majority of Jews don't regard them as Jews. That's the Samaritans. And so they have something called the Samaritan Pentateuch. Here it is. I have a critical edition of the Samaritan Pentateuch edited by Abraham Tal. Here it is. Hebrew. And this was what? Yes, Tel Aviv University, the Chaim Rosenberg School of Jewish Studies, 1994. So they do recite this quite a bit. Interesting thing is that this version of the 5 books of Moses, the Pentateuch, differs from that which the Jews actually have in the Masoretic text, and there are only 6,000 variants. Anyhow, when we come to the Christian New Testament, you don't have a tradition of memorization. And similarly, in the Jewish tradition, you don't have people who've memorized the Masoretic text, for example. So it is a question of manuscripts when talking about Christian and Jewish texts that make up the Bible. Even the term the Bible is a problem. Because if you apply the definite article, then there is some understanding what we are referring to. If I say to you in the English language, hand me the pen, then obviously we have in mind a certain pen. Hence the justification of the use of the definite article. When you say the Bible, what do you mean? Is it the Bible as understood by the Catholics that has 78 books in all? Or is it the Bible as understood by the Protestants, which has 66 books in all? Or is it the Bible understood by the Orthodox Church? And one of the Orthodox churches, I believe it's the Ethiopic, has Ethiopic Orthodox or Abyssinian Orthodox. It goes by different names. I think they have 81 books. So which Bible are you talking about? At any rate, when we speak of the New Testament, it is a question of manuscripts. And so we enter the realm of critical editions. So you have two major critical editions of the New Testament. Now, the New Testament is more than just the gospel according to ... one of four, there's four of them: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's also the Acts of the Apostles, there's the Epistles of Paul, bunch of things. And so you have the Novum Testamentum Graece, edited by Nestle and Aland. This is which edition? Let us check. This is the Nestle Aland edition. I happen to have the yes, it was first came out in 1979, then again 1979, 82. So I have the revised printing of 1983, and this and the other one, they're both published by the Deutsche Bibelgesellschaft in Stuttgart, in Germany. And then we have the Greek New Testament, fourth revised edition. Fourth revised edition, the Greek New Testament. This is fourth revised edition, Barbara Aland, Kurt Aland. So it's the same Aland from the Nestle Aland group one here. Johannes Karadevodopoulos, Carlo M. Martini, and Bruce M. Metzger. Bruce M. Metzger. This too, as you can see, is published by the Deutsche Bibelgesellschaft, or the United Bible Society, the German Bible Society and the United Bible Societies. First came out in 1966. The latest printing is the 17th printing, 2013. Now, if you open these up, you will have at the bottom a whole bunch of little symbols and things, very, very small print, funny letters. That is called the critical apparatus, or in Latin, the apparatus criticus. You have apparatus criticus in this one as well. And you will find that if you go to the Hebrew text as well, the Biblia Hebraica, or the Tanakh, the Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, there too you have an apparatus criticus at the bottom. So what is the apparatus criticus? What's going on with an apparatus criticus? For that we will refer to Professor Crook. It refers to the manuscripts which they have used in the preparation of that edition. It refers to the manuscript. So you'll have some sort of a symbol, an S, a Gothic-shaped S, or a K, or all sorts of symbols that tell you that we are referring to this manuscript, and then it'll have some numbers which refer to, what are something like page numbers, folio numbers. And that begs the question, well, why do you need a critical apparatus? Well, you've got all of these manuscripts, and then you have to decide on the basis of those how to establish your text. Professor Crook, in his Parallel Gospels, a synopsis of early Christian writing, page Roman numeral XVI, that's XVI, page 16. He says this, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by my count. Why do we need a critical apparatus at all? Because, and pay close attention, we do not have any original manuscripts of any book of the Bible. Quite a sentence. Breathtaking, isn't it? All we have are copies of copies, and while we do have an unprecedented number of these copies, nearing 6,000 in number, mind you, some of them are the size of a postage stamp, in different writing styles, on different types of material, and in different languages, one cannot help but be struck and a little terrified. Professor Crook's words, not mine. A little terrified by the fact that no two of these manuscripts, no two, Janabe Aghaye Smith, J. Smith, and Janabe Aghaye Brubaker, Mr. Brubaker, and a little terrified by the fact that no two of these manuscripts are exactly the same in every way. It is hard to count the differences among them. It could be as staggeringly high as 250,000. Those of you who are numerically challenged, that's 250,000. Let me put this into perspective. I continue to quote Professor Crook. Let me put this into perspective. Imagine that I have an ancient manuscript containing the whole New Testament and that I am standing before you reading out loud from it. Now imagine that there are about 6,000 of you listening to me. And each of you is holding something with a part or all of the New Testament written on it. It might be a tiny fragment, as I said, some of them the size of a postage stamp, or a whole New Testament. It might be written in Greek or another language. He doesn't say which language. He says Armenian, for example, Latin. It might be a copy of the New Testament itself or a sermon written by a church father that quotes from the New Testament. Aha. Now, if every time I read out something that is different from what is written on the manuscript you are all holding, one of you raises a hand, one hand or another would be raised as many as 250,000 times by the time I finish reading from my manuscript. Now pay close attention to this final sentence, which I'm going to read from Professor Crook, from the same paragraph. There are, by some counts, only 138,020 words in the Greek New Testament. Let me say that again. There are, by some counts, only 138,020 words in the Greek New Testament, which means there are more variants than there are words in the New Testament, almost twice as many. And you don't have an oral tradition. So you're taking something from here, taking something from there, and you're stitching it all together into a patchwork quilt of something which then you call the Nestle Aland New Testament or the USB 4 or 5 United, UBS or USB, whatever it is. And that is where you are. So that is absolutely shocking. Let us look at one of these, maybe 250,000 problems in the transmission of the New Testament. So there is something called the Gospel according to Mark. And in the Gospel according to Mark, katamarkon in Greek, again, language Jesus did not know, did not use. Chapter 16 ends at verse 8. And this also varies. It depends on the Bible, the translation of the NT, the New Testament that you have. Some of them chop off and actually don't give verses 9 through 20 because they aren't there in almost all of the manuscripts. So you want to put that into perspective. Let's just take the Greek New Testament, the UBS 4, Fourth Revised Edition, in which Bruce Metzger was the Grand Poobah and High Muckety Muck of the committee that was involved in this preparation of this. Imagine now, so we've got, here's katamarkon, yeah, and then here we are, chapter 16, it's the Gospel of Mark, this is the original Greek, language Jesus didn't know. 16, that's the big numbers, chapter 16, and you got these big bold-faced numbers, so verse 1 isn't going to be numbered, but then you got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It should stop there. And then you have, look, and you've got these little English guide headings, guide titles. The resurrection of Jesus, alayhi salam. And then you've got the shorter ending of Mark. And you've got this stuff between these large square brackets, double square brackets, indicating that this is material which is a bit dodgy. The longer ending of Mark, shorter ending, longer ending, and then you've got, I don't know, the longer ending, and it goes on. And then it goes all the way up to here, the ascension of Jesus, up to verse 20. Yeah? So imagine, all of this, let's not count this, this is the apparatus criticus. You notice you need a lot of apparatus criticus here because you're really in the apparatus criticus at this point. So here it is in the UBS 4. My copy of Nestle Aland is, is a little smaller type. So let's move around here. So you can see the same thing here. Here we are again. Katamarkon 16. You've got your numberings 3, 4, 5. There's 8. And here they just put a little paragraph. And then, of course, you can see you've got a lot of apparatus criticus. Oh, a lot of apparatus criticus. All the way up to 20. So as you can see, both of them are just chock full of apparatus criticus. Well, what's at stake here? Let's read in the KJV, the King James Version, also known as the AV, the Authorized Version, the translation of Mark 16, the Gospel according to Mark. Chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. Is it bought or brought? I took this off of the internet. Who knows? I actually don't have a printed copy near at hand. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. And they said among themselves, who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. And entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were affrighted. It means they were scared. And he saith unto them, be not affrighted, ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen, he is not here. Behold the place where they laid him. But go your way, tell his disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him as he said unto you. And they went out quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. End of story. But then you've got 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And the 9, 10, 11, 12 up to 20 talk about the resurrection of Jesus. Number 9, now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week. And then it talks about his manifestation, that he appeared in another form unto 2 of them as they walked and went into the country. Afterward he appeared unto the 11 as they sat at meat, and upbraided them with their unbelief and hardness of heart. Then 15 is very nice. And he said unto them, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So obviously this is a mess. You know, if this isn't part of the gospel according to Mark, then what's all this preaching you're doing? He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned, etc., 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 all the way to the end. So what does the great man, Professor Bruce Metzger, have to say about this? This is a great text of his. I venture to say that it is canonical. That's a funny word. It's funny also how Smith is referring to the canonization of Hafs. We don't have this term canonization. This is one of yours. All right? It just doesn't... This use of Christian terms when talking about Islam is truly a troublesome thing. So the text of the New Testament. That's the title. Look at the subtitle. Beautiful. It's transmission, corruption, and restoration. So he's admitting in the very title of the book, that in its transmission history, the text of the New Testament, and again, we are talking the world of manuscripts, underwent corruption, and presumably it underwent restoration. And Professor Metzger of the Princeton Theological Seminary played a key role in the restoration, in the preparation of this critical edition. Should be noted that Princeton Theological Seminary is not part of Princeton University. Princeton is a village in New Jersey, and it just indicates that it's located there. This is the 3rd enlarged edition. Bruce M. Metzger, Professor of New Testament Language and Literature, Princeton Theological Seminary, page 226. Beautiful question, he says. How did Mark end his gospel? Yes, brother, you have asked a beautiful question. How did Mark end his gospel? This is such a breathtaking response. Unfortunately, we do not know. Semicolon. The most that can be said is that 4 different endings are current among the manuscripts, but that probably none of them, 4 endings, but that probably none of them represents what Mark originally intended to stand as the close of his gospel. These 4 endings may be called the short ending, the intermediate ending, the long ending, and the long ending expanded. I guess that the long ending wasn't so long after all. And then he goes on about the evidence for each of them is as follows. And I really see no point in reading further. The fact is that they don't know. They've got these 4 endings. You want to read further, the book is available. I'm sure you could even find a PDF somewhere. The book is in print. The fact is that an authority, no less than Bruce M. Metzger, has admitted that he has no clue as to how the gospel, according to Mark, is supposed to end. And in the commentary volume known as A Textual Commentary of the Greek New Testament, this whole thing is by Bruce Metzger. The passage which I read to you from there is revisited, and I have not compared to see if he says exactly the same thing, but on this book, A Textual Commentary of the Greek New Testament, 2nd edition, again, Deutsche Bibelgesellschaft, United Bible Societies, 1994, 1st edition 1971, and then 6th printing 2005. He says, beginning on page 102, discussing this whole business about the ending of Mark, the short ending, the intermediate ending, the long ending, which isn't so long because you need a longer ending, and so forth. Absolutely astounding. This whole business of Mark and this ending and the long ending and the longer and the shorter and the longer and the shorter and the shorter and the longer. Absolutely unbelievable. And then Metzger's attempt at justification. It truly stretches beyond belief the elasticity of credulity, of believability. One might as well speak of the gospel according to pulp fiction, or the qira'ah of Quentin Tarantino in the riwayah of Samuel L. Jackson.
You read the Bible, Brett?
Yes.
Well, there's this passage I got memorized. Sort of fits this occasion. Ezekiel 25:17. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed.
That should be testimony enough to show you that these Christians are really, when it comes to their texts, in a dismal position. Not much more can be said about, more or less the same can be said about the Old Testament, as the Christians would call it. We already showed you the Great Samaritan Pentateuch, but there was a huge Herculean effort at bringing out a critical edition of the Hebrew Bible, as it's also called. And this is one of the first fruits of that, which was the Biblia Hebraica, edited by Rudolf Kittel. And then subsequently they came out with this thing called the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia. And it has an extensive critical apparatus, and they used all these sorts of manuscripts. So again, they indicate, because there too it's a manuscript tradition, that they have all of these variants, that they have all of these problems. And one of the most fascinating treatments of the Hebrew Bible is by J. Weingreen, or Weingreen. I suppose if it was totally German, it would be Weingrun, but anyhow, something like that. This is the Introduction to the Critical Study of the Text of the Hebrew Bible by J. Weingreen, Emeritus Fellow of Trinity College Dublin, Emeritus Professor, Hebrew University of Dublin. Clarendon Press, Oxford University, 1982. The table of contents is enough. And you can find this book, it's still in print. Let's look at the table of contents. Intro, nature of textual criticism, scope and limits, aha. Recurring types of error. Error. Unspecified types of error. Glosses and editorial notes. So if you go to the chapter on errors, he admits that there are errors and that some of these were even introduced by the rabbis, which is what the Muslims have been saying for the longest time, that you have corrupted your books. The Quran claims, the Quran states in no uncertain terms that this has happened. This is called tahrif. So when you have a situation like this, should you not put your own house in order? Surely you have enough house cleaning and housekeeping of your own to do. Weingreen was quite a reputable scholar of Hebrew. Another important source is A History of the Hebrew Language. This, of course, is written from a linguistics point of view, but there are a lot of important discussions in here about the way that vowel points are added to Hebrew and the different systems and so forth, which also raise many questions. And so what you find is that there is really nothing called the Bible. which is something that can be referred to by this definite article, which is agreed upon by everybody. The Jews have their thing, which they call the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, or the Tanakh. The Catholics have their own, and they have their own translations even. There's the Douay Rheims translation in English, which they tend to favor, which is based on the Latin Vulgata, or the Vulgate translation by Jerome. You've got, you've got the Protestants and their different versions. My God, there's the King James Version, there's the New International Version, there's the Revised Standard Version, there's the New American Bible. There's one coming out all the time. And whenever, they're passing them out, you see these people called the Gideons. Just take a few, they're free, look at them, and you'll see that, it's just unbelievable. The amount of variation, because there's just all these translations. And again, you might think, well, that's not so big deal, it's a translation. It is, because the vast majority of Christians don't read it in the original, do they? Muslims recite the Quran because it is the recitation, and they recite it in the original. You can go to Bangladesh, and there, people who have no idea about Arabic, whose language is not Arabic, it's Bengali, and the writing system is not even based on Arabic. It's not like in Iran where the writing system is an Arabic script based, or in Urdu and other languages that use an Arabic based script. So it does make a difference, because you've got all these different translations floating around. So there, the situation is in a huge mess, an absolutely huge mess. And if that were not bad enough, I mean, the honest truth is that faith in Christianity is declining every day. Especially in the Western world. These churches are emptying out. Jay Smith, I think he lives in the UK, or he divides his time between the UK and the US. Go to the Anglican church. Those things are empty. Nobody's going. Very few people are going. Faith in Christianity is gone. Did you ever ask yourself why? It's totally irrational, man. Completely. The concept of original sin. There's this Jesus figure, and that's all you need. And it's interesting because Jay Smith, he concludes one of his videos with this. After all this discussion of qira'at and attacking the Quran and so forth, he admits that the Bible is as it is. He doesn't give all these fascinating revelations, which I've put before you, of all of these variants and so forth. But he does, to his credit, allude to these problems. But there he says it doesn't matter, because all you need is Jesus. And this is what you find with the Christians. They're constantly just quoting you John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, blah, 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 blah. And they're constantly just repeating the name of Jesus. Oh, Jesus, Jesus, you just need Jesus. And they're just repeating this same mantra to the point of vertigo. It makes no sense. He is God, he is fully man. Their doctrine is that the three persons of the Trinity, it's one God, three persons of the Trinity who are co-equal and co-eternal. Explain to me how that is even possible. And of course, God died. Oh, but no, it's God's Son that died on the cross. But no, but he's fully God as well. So here I think we can wrap things up. And I should like to, for the benefit of Jay Smith, recite him a poem, which I will recite in Arabic, and no doubt he is a great scholar of the language. Perhaps I will provide him with subtitles, or maybe I will actually just give him the English translation. And I think that he should think very carefully about this poem. عجبا للمسيح بين النصارى حيث قالوا إن الإله أبوه ثم قالوا ابن الإله إله ثم جاءوا بجهلهم عبدوه ثم جاءوا بما هو أعظم من ذا حيث قالوا بأنهم صلبوه ليت شعري وليتني كنت أدري ساعة الصلب أين كان أبوه غائبا عنهم وأنا يراهم أم يقولون بأنهم غلبوه. Strange indeed is the status of the Messiah among the Christians, for they proclaimed God to be his Father, only to proclaim in turn God's Son too is God, and then, in their stupidity, worshipped him. Only then, They went beyond even that, saying that they had crucified him. I really wonder and wish that I could know where his father was when he was being crucified. Absent and unable to see him, or do they think that they outwitted him?
إن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين في نار جهنم خالدين فيها أولئك هم شر البرية